We're going to be talking about full stack AI with AWS Amplify. So, Danny, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry, we kind of reversed ourselves. My name is Danny Banks. I'm a principal design technologist, and I work on the AWS Amplify team.
Hi, I'm Banjo Biami. I'm a senior developer advocate, and I love to build, and I love AI.
And I'm Allie Spittle. I'm the head of developer advocacy for North America, but I was on the Amplify team for the last 4 years. So really excited to talk about a product that both Danny and I have put a lot into building. So here's what we're going to talk about. First, what is the Amplify AI Kit? Why is it cool? We'll also talk about the AI builder tools at Amazon. And then we will do so many demos. We're going to talk about building Gen AI backends, chat user interfaces, conversational search, and at the end, Banjo is going to live code, which I am so impressed by. I have a few questions to start us off. First off, can you raise your hand if you've used Amplify before? Okay, a lot of hands, but also some people who haven't, which is also really exciting to see. And then, on a scale from 1 to 5, how familiar are you with Gen AI? Okay, awesome. So a lot of people who are really familiar with Gen AI, we'll still talk you through some Gen AI stuff, though.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the AWS Generative AI stack. So we like to look at it as 3 different layers. So at the bottom, we have the infrastructure that powers all the large language models, the AI. We have our custom chips like AWS Trainium and AWS Inferentia, and then GPUs. So you can spin up an EC2 instance that has GPUs attached to them. You can train models, custom fine-tune models. And there's also Amazon SageMaker. So this is for machine learning practitioners. They want to train their own model, make inference endpoints, have custom data sets. Amazon SageMaker has a tool, lots of capabilities to allow for that machine learning data science persona. If you move up 1 layer up the stack, this is where most of the, I would say, builders, developers are leveraging AI using Amazon Bedrock. So there's lots of different capabilities, access to different models such as Claude, Meta, Mistral, and then also the Amazon models as well. And if you move up to the top layer of the stack, these are the applications that are using generative AI underneath the hood. So Amazon Q Developer is for software developers. It works in your IDE console. You can ask some questions. I'm going to show some examples of that later. And then Amazon Q Business is more for like the business user persona. They're going to input their data, chat with their documents. That's the #1 use case. Chat with my PDF. And Amazon Q Business allows for that. And just to show some of the ideas on Amazon Bedrock, we have new models. I like to say this slide gets outdated every time I show it, and it'll be outdated by the end of this session, end of this week, I'm pretty sure. New models are always coming out: Anthropic, Cohere, Meta, Stability AI. So there's different ways to just try different new models. You can change 1 line of code using the Converse API to try something different. So I'm just really excited at the breadth of the different models you can try using Amazon Bedrock. This is a cool thing using the Stable Diffusion model. You can just generate images, very beautiful, abstract paintings. The more detailed your prompt is, the better results you can get. So prompt engineering is kind of an art and science at the same time. So it's really fun to see what people can build to create cool things with these large language models. And then touched on an Amazon Q Developer. It works directly in IDE, so you have Visual Studio Code. You can install it. It's free to use. You can ask it questions, you can look at your code base, like inline chat completions, code completions, and like I said, I'll show a demo later so you can understand how builders can leverage this to actually start building stuff. And with that, there's some other AI things, right? Or other tools people use.
Yeah, so another tool for building on AWS is AWS Amplify. And it is built for front-end and full-stack developers specifically. Everything that you need to build web and mobile apps. So you can create an API backed by database in minutes. You can create full authentication flows that are customized to your company's brand, super secure, in just a few lines of code as well. You can deploy server-side rendered apps built with Next.js or Astro or whatever framework that you are using on your front end, and add file storage backed by Amazon S3. You can add serverless functions. And earlier this year, we launched AWS Amplify Gen 2. The first generation was a CLI-based tool or command line interface-based tool that you could use to provision your backend resources and then use the libraries to connect to your front end. Well, Gen 2 is an evolution of that, and it enables developers to write their full backend in TypeScript. So your data, defined in TypeScript. Authentication, defined in TypeScript. Storage, fully TypeScript. And it's all built using the AWS CDK. So Amplify enables you to use certain services very easily by default with just a few lines of TypeScript, but there's also the 200 plus AWS services that aren't given that same level of abstraction in Amplify. Now with the CDK, you can connect to any of them very easily as well. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to create an Amplify app. First, you're going to initialize an app. You're going to do npm create amplify at latest, and it's going to install the dependencies. It'll just take a couple minutes. We can pretend we have super fast Wi-Fi, even though we don't at all the points of reInvent. And then once we do that, we're going to run the Amplify sandbox. That's going to be running the entire time that you develop. Each developer on my team is going to have their own Amplify sandbox. And what that's going to do is enable us to quickly deploy resources as we're developing without clobbering over one another or our deployment environment. So I can add a new data model. It's going to hot reload for me, deploy those resources in the cloud, and only do that in my sandbox, not another developer on my teams. Okay, here's what it looks like, or here's Amplify data. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So first off, with Amplify data, you can create data models using just full stack TypeScript like we discussed. It makes it so that you can fetch the data and model that data in a fully type-safe way. The authorization rules are just defined in code as well, so you can do for example, owner-based authorization, and that's just one line of code. It's real-time by default, so building a real-time API is no more code than static API, and you can add virtually any data source, so you don't just need to use DynamoDB, you can really connect to whatever your application needs. So this is what it looks like to add a model in Amplify. So you can see the user model. We'll scroll down to the bottom and add a new one. I'm going to use QDeveloper to generate this. So I'm going to create a review model, and you can see that Q suggests this model with these different fields. I'm going to change up some of them. They just don't perfectly fit what I'm looking for, so I'll change the text and score. I'll also add the date. You can see that authorization rule down at the bottom that allows owner-based auth and then also public API key. And I could further specify this. So the public API key could only be for reading, for example. And then you'd need to be an owner to create, update, or delete. This is what it would look like on the client side to interact with that data model in my front end. So in order to create a new review, I would provide the listing, the reviewer, the date, the text, and then the score, which were the fields that I defined in that last demo. And if I wanted to list out the different reviews in my database, I could just do client.models.review.list. Authentication looks very similar. You can have custom authentication flows and login experiences in just a few lines of code, fully customized to whatever your application needs, as well as those fine-grained access controls that we saw earlier. So this is what adding authentication looks like. So you have the TypeScript code, email true. I can further configure this, so verification email subject, verify your email, and I'll add a little emoji there. Then on my client side, I can use a React component called the authenticator component and wrap whatever I want to require authentication for in that component. And it's going to give me a full login experience like this, just with that one component. So I'll create a new one. You can see that it made me do the verification email, have the code, it had that custom subject line, and you can really configure it to be whatever you need. Okay, gonna pass it over to Danny to combine the two things that we've talked about, AI and Amplify.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about what we've spent about the last year or so building at Amplify. It's not the only thing we built in the last year at Amplify, but the thing that I worked on for over a year. And it actually started at reInvent last year. We gave a session or a few sessions about how to build full stack generative AI applications using Amplify and AWS AppSync and Amazon Bedrock. And it was pretty good. You could create a full stack application with generative AI capabilities somewhat easily, but we thought we could do better, and we thought we could build better first-class support for building generative AI applications. So we spent this past year and we talked to a lot of developers, front-end and full-stack developers, about the problems they were having creating generative AI applications, and specifically creating kind of the front-end or full-stack piece of those generative AI applications. And we came across 3 themes that we really wanted to hit on with the Amplify AI kit. And so the first theme is having a code-first developer experience for Amazon Bedrock. Building off the Amplify Gen 2 functionality that Ali just showed, you define all of your AI functionality just in TypeScript files. In this instance, we're defining generative AI functionality in our Amplify data resource file. And with that, we get the per developer sandboxes where you can be making changes and developing locally and getting those updates in your cloud developer sandbox and actually interacting with real cloud resources, an actual AppSync API, actual Lambdas in Bedrock. And when you're ready to deploy, you push a branch and Amplify will deploy both the backend and front end at the same time. So you get a very nice full stack TypeScript experience where the backend and front end is always in sync. And so we really kind of want to bring that to the generative AI space, or kind of building generative AI applications. The next thing we really want to hit on was being able to easily provide the LLMs, or large language models, with secure access to your data. We noticed that data access is one of the key components in building really immersive generative AI applications. Anyone, or not anyone, but it's pretty easy to just, grab a large language model and create a chatbot. But what really makes it different and interesting is actually giving it access to your data. And we do that with the Amplify Gen 2 kind of backend data construct. So we make it really easy to give an LLM access to your data that you define, whether that's within Amplify or any external data source, any AWS service. We make it super easy to give the LLM access to your data, or just data in general. And the last thing we really want to help improve was building conversational interfaces. And one of the things we saw is we really want to break outside of the normal chatbot interface, just like here's some text back, here's some more text. Maybe there's a code block or something, but we really want to help build generative UI, so being able to respond with custom components. And we really want to make it easy for anyone to build a conversational experience. So whether that's just like a chatbot conversational experience or conversational search, we really want to make it super easy to kind of connect the full end-to-end stack, including the UI, to a generative AI application. And so enough talking about it, let's actually build something with it. So first thing we're going to build, let's build a review summarizer. And there's a couple key points that we're going to do here. It's going to have secure access to Amazon Bedrock through AppSync. So AppSync is going to authorize all of the requests. So we have secure access from the client, the website, actually to Bedrock. And having a type-safe client based on our backend definition. So if we make any updates to our backend definition, our front end is type-safe. We'll see a type error in the client call if we make a change. So we can be making those changes locally and having the front end and back end always in sync. And lastly, having React hooks to kind of handle the state and network request. I don't want to have to deal with, managing network requests or managing state or anything like that. I just want to write React code, right? And so for this demo, I built a very simple vacation home rental listing application like Vrbo or Airbnb. I built it using React Next.js and Amplify. And so I added some listings here. Users can browse and look at listings and read reviews and book things. And so what I'm going to add here is a generate summary button that will call Amazon Bedrock to generate an AI summary of the reviews for that listing. So this is what we're going to build with the Amplify AI kit. So let's go over to our full stack code base and go into our Amplify data resource file. This is where you define all of your data models and custom queries to fetch any of your data. So here we're going to add some new generative AI, a new generative AI API called a review summarizer. And it's a generation, so it's going to generate some data, and then we're just going to define the AI model that we want to use in Bedrock. So here I'm going to use Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and then I just define a system prompt of what I want it to do. I want to provide, a concise summary of the reviews, and maybe give it a little bit more information, like how long the summary should be. And so I'm defining all of this in my backend in TypeScript, and then I define the arguments or the input that I want this function to have. So I want to give it an array of strings, which will be the reviews, and I want to return an object with a summary, which is a string. So this is what I want to return, and then I define my authorization. So I only want to allow authenticated users to be able to access this API. Now I go over to my React component. I'm going to remove some of the mock implementation that I built, and then I'm going to use the React hook in the Amplify AI kit called use AI generation. And this is, again, type safe based on my backend definition, so it knows I have a review summarizer generation route. And then it returns some React state and a handler, and then I just need to call that handler when a user clicks on a button, and the Amplify AI kit takes care of the rest, basically. So now going back over to our application, we now have this generate summary button. When a user clicks on it, it will reach out to AppSync, hit Bedrock with the data, and then get back the AI-generated summary. So we did all this in a dozen, 2 dozen or so lines of code, all in a single code base and without leaving the IDE. But this was pretty simple. So I'm actually going to hand it back to Allie to do something a little bit more fun.
Yeah, so let's add a conversational search experience. So for a few requirements, first off, we want to have a multi-turn experience with streaming responses. So then we want a multimodal search to allow uploading of images. We want to be able to query the existing data for our application. So the listings that you all saw for the vacation rental instance, we want to be able to query those. And we want to show the results in an interactive way. So not just a pure chat interface, we want it to be a custom UI. So this is what it's going to look like at the end. We can say, like, show me a listing with this vibe and upload an image. And it'll respond saying that it's happy to find a listing. LLMs are so helpful like that. Like, certainly I'd be happy to. And it's going to hit my database to say, hey, this one looks like it has a similar vibe to what you're looking for. And it's using a user interface component, not just a chat-based UI. Okay, so what the code's going to look like, we're going to go into our data file again. We're going to choose an AI model. So we'll do Claude 3.5 Haiku. We're going to create a system prompt saying that it's a helpful assistant to a home rental booking app. And then we'll add an authorization model here as well and allow owner-based auth here. Then we're going to use the use AI conversation hook in React. We'll get the messages back. And then plug it into the AI conversation component. We'll pass in the messages. We'll do the is loading spinner there, and then the handle send message as well. And just like that, in about 24 or so lines of code, we have a secure chat powered by Amazon Bedrock, and we're having conversations with it. Going back to our data resource file, we're going to add tools to this. So tools will give the LLM access to the data in our application. So I'm going to choose my listing model, and I want to list items from that listing model. Lots of listing going on. And we'll call this tool search listing, and we're going to use it to search for those rental listings. So now if I ask it to look for rental listing by the beach, it's going to be able to hit the listings that are already in my database and say, hey, here are some that might fit your vibe. Okay, you want to talk more about tools?
So I do want to pause for a little bit and kind of dive a little bit deeper into tools because it is a very important concept in generative AI applications and something we spent a lot of time on in the Amplify AI kit. So as Ali mentioned, LLM tools are a way for you to tell the LLM, hey, you have access to certain data or information, because these models are trained on vast amounts of static data. Obviously, they don't know what the current state of the world is because they've been trained on data that was, a year or two old. They also don't have information about your application or anything else. So the way we give the LLMs access to this data is through tools, sometimes referred to as like function calling. And what happens is you describe the tool that the LLM has access to, like, for example, a get weather tool. And you define what the inputs that it accepts are, like it accepts a city, which is a string. And then when you prompt the LLM with the user message, like, what's the weather in Las Vegas, and you give it a tool definition that says get weather, the LLM might respond with, hey, I want to invoke the get weather tool with the input of Las Vegas. And then it's the kind of application owner or the application code to basically take that result and then invoke that tool, like the get weather function or API or whatever, and then pass those results back to the LLM, reprompt the LLM, adding those results into the message history, and kind of continue the thought process, basically. And this could happen multiple times. The LLM could choose multiple tools in sequence, and you have to kind of manage all of that orchestration, usually yourself. And so what we've done with the Amplify AI kit is kind of taken care of a lot of that undifferentiated heavy lifting for you. So as you saw previously, you just define a data tool and give it access to a model like the listings model. And then the Amplify AI kit will take care of describing the inputs to that tool to the LLM. When it responds with it wants to invoke that tool, we'll actually make that request on behalf of the user, give the data back to the LLM, reprompt it, all while streaming the results back to the client. So we kind of take care of all of that orchestration for you. And one important thing that Amplify AI Kit does take care of is authorizing the tool invocations on behalf of the user so that the LLM doesn't have access to more data than the user does. So for example, if you're building like a to-do application and each user has their own to-dos and no one can see the other people's to-dos, if you build a chatbot and you say like, what to-dos do I have that are incomplete yet or are complete or whatever, it will only have access to the user's to-dos that ask the question. It won't have access to all of the to-dos. So this is something that we really spent a lot of time on and is a very important kind of building generative AI applications with data access, is giving the right level of authorization and the right level of access. And this all works by funneling everything through AWS AppSync. So client requests come in and they go to AppSync, which authorizes the request and sends it to Bedrock. when the LLM wants to invoke a tool, that also goes through the same AWS AppSync API, and then gets the results back, and then thinks again, potentially responds to the user. So everything kind of goes through AWS AppSync as an AI gateway or an AI gateway layer. And so we saw how to add, a model-based data tool. So we can also add a custom query-based data tool. I talked about having a get weather function, for example. So let's add a get weather custom query data tool. So I already have the get weather custom query built. It just hits some external API with an API key. And here I can just say, you have this tool called get weather, and here's the description. Again, because I've defined this in my Amplify data schema, I don't need to describe the inputs or whatever because I've already defined that in my custom query definition already. So now if I go back, I can ask, what's the weather over there? And because I've already had a conversation with the AI assistant, it knows I asked for a listing by the beach, it returned a listing in Mission Beach, California, which is near San Diego. And so when I ask, what's the weather like over there, and it has this new get weather data tool, it puts 2 and 2 together and says, okay, I need to invoke this get weather tool with Mission Beach as the input, and then Amplify AI Kit will kind of take care of actually calling that, returning the results, and then responding to the user. So now it responds with, the temperature is 82 degrees, and here's the wind speed. It's a beautiful day in Mission Beach. So now we have a really kind of robust conversational experience that can have conversation history and get data and have a very rich experience kind of talking with this AI assistant. But now let's make the UI a little bit more tailored to our application. So this is still pretty basic. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is, update the avatar. So I don't want to just say like user as the user actually sending the messages. I want to use the user that's currently logged in. So let's go and do that. So going over to our conversational search page, we have this AI conversation component. Because this is just a plain React component and using a plain React hook, we can do lots of stuff with this. So we can grab, the user context. I have a user provider in my React application, and I can pass in the user's username to the avatar. And then I can also pass in my own custom user avatar component to be rendered. And then lastly, LLMs tend to respond with markdown flavored text. So I actually want to render that markdown with the markdown renderer so I get proper headings and lists and stuff like that. So I added that to the message renderer to actually render markdown. Now going back to the conversation, when I ask it to find me listings by the beach, you can see my avatar and username is actually showing up in the chat now. And now when it responds, you see kind of the nice markdown rendered text where it's actually rendering lists and stuff like that. So this is, this is starting to look pretty good, but there's still a few more things that we can do. So early on, we talked about being able to upload images to search based on images and also respond with components. So let's actually go ahead and do that. So going back to our AI conversation React component, we just need to allow attachments, and that will let users upload images to search based off of. And then here I'm adding response components, and this is something that I'm super happy and excited about. So this is how you define UI components that the AI assistant or large language model can respond with. And these are just plain React components. They can have internal state, they can fetch data if they want. I just need to pass a plain React component, give it a description, and give it the props that it accepts. So here I have a listing card and a booking card component. Both accept an ID, which is the ID of the listing. And then now the LLM can respond with these components rather than just saying in text, I found this listing in Mission Beach, potentially with an ID of something else. So now, going back to the original demo, show me a listing with this vibe. I'll select an image of a beach. And so the large language model Claude 3.5 Sonnet or 3.5 Haiku will understand this image. This is an image of a beach, so I'm going to look for beach listings. And then it's querying our database. It found a listing, and now it's actually responding with a UI component. Here's the listing component. And so we were basically able to do this in, 15 or so minutes in under, I don't know, 50 or so lines of code, and all without ever leaving the IDE, just completely writing plain TypeScript in React. And then there's one more thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to pass it off to Banjo to talk about Bedrock knowledge bases.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, so knowledge bases are really amazing. You saw how passing the relevant context to the LLM allowed it to respond better responses. So knowledge bases allowed that. So it's a fully managed RAG workflow. A RAG is retrieval augmented generation. So the first thing people want to do with LLMs is, I have a bunch of data, how can I chat with that? So knowledge bases allows you to abstract that away where you can just upload your PDF, add your stuff, and then knowledge bases has a pipeline that can actually extract that. So to see what happened, how it looks like in action, think about, I have my data source, I have my PDF. When I upload it to a knowledge base, it chunks those texts into manageable things. So when you ask a large language model, like, tell me about what happened in this PDF about this, it's able to find the relevant context from that and use that to respond. It passes those chunks into an embedding model and puts that in a vector store. So what that means is it turns the raw text into numbers, and because it's in numbers, we have algorithms that actually search through that. So when a user asks a question, that text also gets put through an embedding model. So, and that also becomes another number. So then we have a way to search between. So if I'm looking for data on California, everything in that PDF document that mentions California is able to bring that up. And then we actually have that, and that allows us to have what we call retrieval augmented generation. That context is now put into the prompt, the large language model, based on your response and all based on the context I was able to find in the knowledge base. Here's your more relevant response because I have that added context that we extracted from the knowledge base.
And I'm going to show how to connect the actual Bedrock knowledge base to our conversational component here. So to connect an Amazon Bedrock knowledge base, we'll use an AWS AppSync JavaScript resolver. And so this is actually a pretty nice, easy way to connect any HTTP-based API to your Amplify data. So here you just need to define a request and response function that the AppSync JavaScript resolver will call. And so here we're going to give it a resource path, so it's going to hit the knowledge bases API. The XXXXX would be your knowledge base ID. And then I'm passing in the parameters that I want to send to that API. So I want to send the retrieval query. And then I just want to stringify the results and send it back. And so I have this JavaScript resolver defined. And then I'm going to define a custom query in my data schema. And I'm going to give it the arguments. I want input, which is a string. So this will be like the user's input. And then I'm going to define the handler, which is a reference to our AppSync JavaScript resolver, and specify a data source. So it's going to hit the knowledge-based data source, and then it's going to return a string. And then again, add the authorization rules, so only authenticated users can use it. And now our conversation is almost hooked up to our knowledge base. First, we just need to add an AI tool, again, using a custom query and referencing the knowledge base custom query name, pass it a description and pass it a name, and we are hooked up with Bedrock knowledge bases in our existing conversation. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Banjo to do some live coding.
All right, the fun part, what everyone's waiting for. All right, so let's build. All right, let me switch this over. So I know all y'all want to get started. So in the AWS samples repo, there's an Amplify AI examples. So this is code that's live right now. You can get on GitHub if you want to get started with some of these cool Amplify AI kit stuff we've been talking about. So it shows a basic example of creating a chatbot. So I have a chatbot here, like, hello, what can you help me with? And it goes through, it's an AI assistant that can help with wide variety of tasks, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of that standard chatbot UI you've seen. So all this code's, again, on GitHub. You can go through it, download it. And what happens when I download it, I'm going to actually open this. This is how it looks like For me, I wouldn't say I'm a front-end developer. I like Python. I do a lot of AI stuff. So I'm leveraging AI to help me understand what's going on. I'm actually going to use Amazon Q. So I can say something like, let me start a new chat here. With Amazon Q, there's something called Workspace, where I can do at Workspace, what does this repo do? And how Amazon Q Developer works is it's able to look at all the code in the repo and find all the relevant things. So it found the README file, it's a chat interface, uses Amplify Gen 2, have conversations with the Claude by Haiku model, restore privacy settings, uses Amazon Cognito. So it's able to see everything in the actual repo, give me exactly what happens, how to start it, clone the repo, run the sandbox to send up all the resources necessary. So me as a front-end specialist, this is great just to have their understanding right exactly in the code. So we have this. And then one other cool thing is I actually go through the code. We saw it's using Claude 3 Haiku. With Amazon Q Developer, there's an inline chat feature, so I can say, let's update the model to Sonnet and make the prompt better. Yes, very, very scientific there. So I was able to go through there, look through. It updates the code, Claude 3 Sonnet. It gives me a better system prompt, and I can press accept right there. So that updates the code. And yeah, so that's a cool thing. An inline code piece, and I can just update the code right there. It should auto-populate to this. It's kind of hard to test the system prompt, but it's there. But another thing I want to do is I actually want to change the background color. It looks kind of basic right now. Again, I'm not a front-end dev, so I'm going to do at Workspace, where can I change? I change the background color. There are two ways, to the CS, global CSS, or, oops, it gives me a bunch of code there. Oh, what did it say here? Or go to theme index CS. So a lot of files here. So, theme, I think I have it index CS. So I can go here, said update it here. Again, I can use Q Developer. I can say update the background to light blue. It generates the code. It says tokens, primary value, accept. Save that, go back, and it updated it. Yeah, so me, this is very helpful for me as I'm new to front end. I don't have to go back to other websites. Everything can be done right in the IDE. Ask questions, update the code. It shows me what file I should update. So for me, there's so many files in these front end projects. So it's very helpful for me to understand which file I need to update. What can I change? So this has been a game changer for me. Just loves to build and do things. So very happy using Amazon Q Developer to just get started and build.
Always impressed with people live code.
Yes, very fun.
So if you want to learn more, you can go to docs.amplify.aws/AI. I really like that URL. Danny and I worked on that for a while. That QR code can take you right there.